It's the Beatles from the beginning to the end. It's their solo careers. It's their humor. It's their incredible music. It's the British invasion. It's their American adversaries. It's an historical musical education. It's the Beatles and a whole lot more. A Beatles fan's paradise. It's Beatles-A-Rama. Tune in. You'll love it. This is Pat Matthews of Pat Matthews Productions, and I want to welcome you to Beatles-A-Rama TV, your favorite interviews and video all in one place, right here on Beatles-A-Rama TV. Beatles-A-Rama TV is on the air.
Hi, everybody. I'm James D. Jones from the Magical Mystery Tour, The Beatle Years and Beyond for Beatles-A-Rama Radio and TV. And today, well, I've got a special guest for you. This guest, well, let's just put it this way. Few musicians embody the word resilience like Billy Amendola. From a Brooklyn kid, inspired by the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, to founding Mantus, to igniting dance floors on Studio 54 to Roseland, to pioneering the fusion of acoustic and electronic drums in the studio. Amendola has lived through more than one musical revolution and always found a way to stay a step ahead every time. Now, his career, it is a tapestry woven with disco anthems, platinum pop hits, and collaborations with icons ranging from Debbie Gibson to Branford Marsalis, and even to Ringo Starr. And just when most would have been resting on their laurels, Billy reinvented himself again. And this time as a writer, editor, mentor, and guiding voice at Modern Drummer. That's pretty good. Where his passion for the craft of rhythm inspired a generation of players. Now, today, Amendola's story is more than just about the grooves and gigs, but it's about endurance. It's about adapting and the belief that music isn't as much about giving back as it is about being in the spotlight. And with his son, Matty, now following his path, Billy stands as proof that rhythm can be both legacy and lifeline. And we're going to sit down with Billy today, and we're going to have a conversation that goes beyond the beats into luck, loss, and fatherhood, survival, and what it really means to reinvent yourself in an industry that never stops changing. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Billy Amendola. How you doing, Billy?
I'm doing great. How are you? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I hope that was a good introduction for you.
That was an excellent introduction. You covered a lot. I see you did your homework.
I did. And I mean, I love rhythm. I love drums. You know, growing up, I got in so much trouble because I was always doing a beat on my desk in school, right? Teachers would get so upset with me. It's another story for another day. But let's talk about Billy. Let's talk about you. And to start us off, I'm just going to come out and say it, Billy. You have lived through the rise and fall of multiple eras of music. From Mantus playing in the CBGBs in the late 70s to disco dominance to Debbie Gibson's pop explosion and now into the podcasting age. So, Billy, looking back, what common thread do you see tying all of these seemingly different scenes together?
I try not to look back too much, and I try not to analyze things, and you know what it's like. Sometimes you don't want to overanalyze things or think. Sometimes, I love. I had a conversation with George's wife Olivia one time, and
Oh yeah.
we were talking about the song "Cheer Down."
Oh
So
yeah.
I always think about that, and I need someone around me to always say "cheer down" because otherwise, when you're on a roll and you're doing things, you kind of don't really think about it. Things just happen, and I
Yeah.
believe in the universe, and things happen for a reason. So I kind of just go with the flow, but. I think the main motivation, of course, is my passion and my love for music because music is so important. And to me, it's always been about the music. Not only just playing drums. Drums was the instrument that I chose to play, but
Hmm.
it's all about to me the music, the song, the message, and you know I just love music, and anything I can do to help somebody progress a little bit in their career, it just makes me happy. It just makes me happy to make people happy.
It's like coming full circle. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then, of course, ever since I played with Ringo a few years ago when I sat in with the All Stars,
Hmm.
I thought, that would be the only time I did it, and then I got to do it again. So it was pretty good. But ever since then, it's funny how life is, and I always say life's a facade because nobody really knows what's going on 100%,
No.
unless you're being followed by TMZ, which thankfully they don't care about me. So that's great because I get a little paranoid when people come up and they know me and I have no idea who they are. So
Yeah.
but it's it's all good. And then once I sat in with Ringo, it became like all of a sudden, especially Beatle fans,
Hmm.
everybody was. It is an exciting thing. I mean that I must say. And talking about full circle, that's what really made it full circle for me.
Right. I mean,
Seeing the
because
Beatles on Ed Sullivan like we all
yeah.
did, and then
Right.
becoming a drummer. I even said to him one time, one of the first few times I met him many years ago, over 30 years ago, I said, it's all your fault that I play drums. And he goes, "Are you any good?" And I was like, well, and at this point I had a couple of records out and I had the
Yeah.
band that had a couple of little bit of success. And I said, well, I have records out and I played, I work. And he goes, then I did my job.
I love it. That's nice. And to hear that from Ringo, I bet that was probably
Oh,
just a moment for you, wasn't it?
yeah, I mean, all the Beatles. I had met John, George. I went to sound check, but I didn't get to meet him when he played the Garden.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
I met Billy Preston. George was late that day, and
Ah,
then Paul, I just said hello to, and of course Ringo is. He's a good friend.
oh yeah. No, I've enjoyed a lot of his Ringo Starr and the All Star bands. I've seen so many different variations of them that it's always a treat to see Ringo. It just is. Because he's having fun.
Exactly. That's and
Yeah.
that's what it all comes down to. Interviewed him recently for the sessions panel, and
Hmm.
that's basically was his main advice. If you're not having fun, then do something else.
Yeah. No, that's really a good way of putting it, isn't it? And I mean, if you're not having fun, what's the point, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Now, Billy, let's put it this way: well, let's see, your career has often required reinvention, from rocker to disco hit maker to studio innovator, magazine editor, mentor. What has been the hardest part about letting go of one chapter to fully embrace the next?
Um, I don't, all of that stuff kind of through the years is going to evolve. Everything evolves into something else. And
Hmm.
I get bored very easily. I don't know if it's because I'm a Sagittarius, but I need adventure and I need to constantly be doing something. And I don't get hung up on one thing, you know. sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing, because I'll do something and it'll be mind blowing. And it's like, I call
Mhm.
it magic moments because you can't plan them. And
Right.
then right away, the next day, I'm like, everybody's talking about it. And I'm like, next, that's just me. Next.
Yes. So it's kind of like instead of letting go of a chapter, you are looking for the next challenge.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it because I need to keep moving forward. We all need to keep moving forward.
Right.
We all need to keep learning. Once you think you know it all, it's over. We have to keep learning, and if you don't change with the times, whether you like them or not, or the way things are going, then you
Mhm.
become a dinosaur or a grouchy old
Yeah.
man.
Or both, right?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, some days I get up, I'm definitely a grouchy old man. But, then I'll snap out of it because I'll say, you know what? Come on.
Yeah.
I've been blessed with a good life, so
Yeah.
what is there to complain about? But if we don't complain, then we don't get it off our chest.
Well, my grandmother always used to tell me, Billy, the day you stop complaining is the day you're ready for the box.
Yeah, well, this is true because most of my complaints is just to make things better.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not really a complaint, but some people
No.
could take it as a complaint. And
Right.
I'm very, very honest. If you're going to ask me a question, I'm going to be very honest, no matter
Mhm.
what it is, and that's good and bad as well, because some
Yeah,
people
because you
don't
never
like,
know.
they don't want to hear the truth. Some people don't want to hear the truth, and I don't like to hurt people's feelings, but
No.
I also don't like to lead them on, or you
Right.
know
You want to be real with them.
yeah, yeah. If that's my main thing with people, and that's how you get to know people. And coming
Mhm.
from Brooklyn, I always say this. Growing up in Brooklyn,
Yeah.
Italian, you see through bullshit right away.
Oh,
People
yeah.
think people could think they're getting over on you, and I give a
Mhm.
lot of people the benefit of the doubt
Right.
until they just totally show me that they're disrespecting me, and then I don't
Mhm.
put up with that, so I just
Yeah.
walk away.
Who they really are. You got it. Well, Billy, you once described how a single chance encounter jamming on Brick House for a nearly empty club shifted Mantus's entire career into disco. Can you lay out the story for me and how it happened?
Yeah, we were playing around the scene. We were, we started out all the way back in 19. Well, I was young, so I was the youngest, and thankfully I had older brothers because we were all like brothers. We all grew up in walking distance. We were together all the time. So in '72, me and Frank DiGuscenzo, we call him Deke,
Hmm.
we got together because he was playing with a fellow musician, a friend of ours, Mike Riddle. And to this day, Mike Riddle is still involved in everything I do. And
Hmm.
I met him when I was about 10 and he was about 15.
Oh,
So
wow.
Frankie Deke sang in his band, and then he came over to my band. They had changed their sound, and then Frankie, and then we started a band called Uncle Sam. We went into a band called Gypsy,
Mm.
and we were very, very into 70s rock, which is what was
Yeah.
happening at the time.
Hmm.
And then we always started in Gypsy. We started writing some originals, but everything was rock. And
Hmm.
then we almost got a deal on Swan Song, which, believe it or not, was a pretty wild experience. And then we started playing clubs. People put us in monkey suits and put us in the Hilton hotels and playing that kind of scene. They wanted us to do, this is where the money is and this is what you guys should be doing. So we started doing some top 40 gigs because the pay was pretty good and
Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
long-term gigs, they were for a
Hmm.
week. And we started traveling doing that, but we that's not what we wanted to do, but we were playing top 40, and at the time rock was starting to like fade away, and then like
Hmm.
every decade new music comes in. So
Yeah.
disco dance music was really starting to get popular, especially after Saturday Night Fever, which was writing up
Right.
in our neighborhood, so we played there a bunch of times. um, and then we changed the name of the band when we got Jimmy Mayer into the band, and John Kaz was also in Uncle Sam, later version of Uncle Sam. He was in Gypsy. And then when we got Jimmy Mayer into the band, we said, okay, now we're going a different way. So we changed the name of the band to Mantus.
Oh,
And then that was in 76. And then we were doing block parties and playing all around. And then finally we met a manager. um, we were playing the circuit in the city, and we weren't really like happy with some of the jobs we were getting. You know, typical agents were just getting us
yeah.
whatever they could. We were at Trudy Heller's, a very famous club in New York City back in the day, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and we just, hardly anybody. I think there was 3 people in the place, so we and Jimmy had we all bought new shirts for that, and Jimmy still
Yeah.
had tag from, I think it was A&S, the store A&S. He still had the tag on his back, and we let him play the whole show till we told him that the tag was still on his shirt, because he probably was never going to wear it again anyway. And so we're playing our music, and then all of a sudden we used to go into, we were all into funk and Motown and
Hmm.
R&B music. So we just, I would do the drum roll, and then we would go into Brick House for about a half hour. And
Oh, wow.
we would just play funk, and Frankie would make up lyrics and sing. We would be writing songs like right on the stage. So long
Yeah.
story short, this gentleman comes up to us and he says, I was gonna leave, but then you guys started playing some funk, and it's like, I have a small independent disco label, and I'd like to take you guys into the studio. Do you think you could write a disco song? And of course, wise, 5 wise guys from Brooklyn with long hair, rock and roll band. We were like, yeah, we could do a disco song. So lo and behold, we went in. He took us in the studio. He had a couple of songs he wanted us to do. We tried
Uh-huh.
them. We didn't like them. They were very
Oh,
wimpy, and it just wasn't our thing. So
right.
we wrote what we thought was a disco song, but it happened to be kind of heavy. And
Mm.
Ray Chu, the famous Ray Chu, to this day, he does Dancing with the Stars. He's one of the biggest music directors.
Yep.
He was playing with Diana Ross at the time, and that's one thing that this manager, record label guy did, was he put us in the studio with the greatest studio musicians at the time. We didn't realize that we were paying for all this because we were so young, but it was a good thing because we had the greatest musicians in the world playing, parts that we
Yeah.
weren't on the record. So it made enough noise. Went to Canada. We came back. Uh, and then he said, let's do another one. We did another one, and that one became Dancer Freestyle. That became a pretty big hit. It was a top 10 hit, and then it became number 2 on the most popular radio station here in New York, and in the top
Mm.
10 all across the country for 8 weeks straight. And then we did the album. We had another hit, Rocket to the Top. And then
Hmm.
next thing you know, we were going to Italy to do TV shows for Europe. We were supposed to go to South America because we had the number 1 record, but a little civil war broke out at that time.
Oh.
And we decided not to go. But
Mm.
we went on tour, and we did the whole thing, flying around in planes, and staying at nice places, and again, not realizing that we were paying for all this.
Yeah. So you were living the life of Riley, but on your own tab, if you will.
Exactly, exactly. And then, he wasn't really a businessman. He
Yeah.
had the label, but he gave us a break. And, he was older than us, even though at the time, I think he was in his 40s. So we were in our 20s. So we
Wow.
thought he was old, old
Yeah.
and,
Right. Yeah.
and wise, but, you know, he really wasn't. So he made some bad deals, and, he did some things. We gave away our publishing, and,
Oh.
the typical things that
Yeah.
happen to bands.
Yep. Nope. You hit the nail right on the head there. Now, Billy, let me ask you this. That experience you had was probably, like you said, it was really a blessing in disguise. And having said that, do you think that luck has more to do with music careers than talent? Or is it more about being prepared when the opportunity knocks?
Oh, it's being prepared. Luck is a very small part of life. I'm not a big believer in luck. I'm a big believer in being blessed.
Ah,
I feel like when people do good and people do well, they're really blessed. And your test there is once it's proven to you that you're blessed,
Hmm.
you have to learn that very early on. It takes time sometimes. You don't learn it till you get older. Thankfully, throughout the years, I always felt blessed. Now, losing my dad at a young age,
Mm.
um, I was 20, he was only 52, and the band had just started. So to me, it was like, well, my dad's old, and that's what happens when you get old, you die, not realizing that he was so young. And, he
Yeah.
passed from cancer. And back then, in
Mm.
1979, cancer was, it was a death sentence. They didn't even have chemo back then. So
Right.
I think I always felt that my dad was always watching over me because my dad was so into music. And he's growing up, he used to, he was very into music. He was always with the band and, of course, typical dad driving my drums around and the band,
Yeah.
putting a down payment for our first van, But it was, I always felt like he was looking out for me. So, and then as I got older and things started happening, as I said, things just happen. You can't plan. Once you plan
Hmm.
something, it doesn't happen, because you can manifest things, but
Hmm.
you can't say, oh, this is going to happen like this. Or you go in the studio, you write a song, you go, oh, this is going right to the top. This is going to be now. You do it. You like it for yourself, and then you hope everybody else likes it, and you have no control over that. You don't know if it's going to sell. I've played on
Right.
records as a session musician that I thought, oh wow, this is going to put me on the map, major people, and no one even knew the record came out. So I always felt to this day, and it's been proven to me so much, that I don't have as much anxiety anymore as I did
Mm.
growing up. Always worrying about something, so I
Yeah.
feel being blessed. And what you said, when the opportunity comes, you do have to be ready.
Right. Well,
You do have to
it
be
sounds
ready.
like you did quite well and you're still doing well. And you've always been adapting and everything. And speaking of adapting, uh, when you first blended acoustic and electric drums in the studio, the electronic drums, it was cutting edge. Now, hybrid drumming is everywhere. So,
Yeah.
what is something that you pioneered or experimented with that you wish would have caught on but didn't?
Well, it did catch on. It just took a little time. People used to say, you're ahead of your time. You're ahead of your time, which I always thought was a good thing. Um,
Right.
you know, but pretty much what I accomplished with that, and I got to give credit to Jimmy Braylauer because he was the main guy back then who
Hmm.
really had all of that down. But when drum machines came out and that whole sound started to change, I embraced it because I give the drum machine credit for me becoming a songwriter and a producer.
Mm.
So all my friends and some of my very famous friends that backed away or rebelled against the drum machine, they lost a lot of work and
Oh.
they did not. Everybody was either you thought, oh my God, my job's done, it's over with, or you just got disgusted and you didn't want to do it, but you
Hmm.
had to because that was the sound of the 80s. I mean,
Yeah.
the whole sound of the 80s was programmed drums. To this day, people are still programming drums.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's just got a little better because you can't tell the difference. So, I used to do things like, screw off the top of the microphone and put it up against a bass drum and plug it into the back of the Lynn machine, and I
Hmm.
used to get yelled at, just like the Beatles when Jeff Emerick took off the bottom head and he put the microphone inside the drum. I mean, that
Yeah.
was sacrilegious. You can't do things like that. So I used to always look for different sounds. I always liked different sounds. And Frankie, uh, my lead singer, Frankie DiCrescenzo, he used to do, we used to go, sometimes he would come up on his own. Sometimes I would say, go like this. And it would sound like what became a backward cymbal, or just go
Oh,
on my snare drum. So
yeah.
we were starting and people didn't know what it was. And then we got, percussion instruments, slapsticks and all of that,
Hmm.
that started making that sound. So I was always looking for different sounds. And then when I was a big follower of studio musicians, so I saw Jeff Porcaro had gotten a pair of Sin drums, and nobody really knew what drums were at the time, but they were just,
Right.
these electronic drums. So I kind of took it to the next level with Mantus. I actually had a request to rent a pair for the studio, and they couldn't get the Sin drums, so they got me these Snare 3s, they were called, which became
Hmm.
very popular. But it was a little bit different from Syndromes. So I used those as tom toms, and it
Oh.
gave Mantis a certain sound. It was, I think, Ring My Bell was one of the songs that had that
Mm.
sound, but it was
Yep.
just like on the beat, on the beat. So when we did the Mantis record, I started playing around with that, and I got the sound,
Ah.
and then I got the boom, 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 that sound, and I used it more as tom tom. So that sound became identifiable with Mantis.
Hmm.
So, and then from doing the Mantis records and people hearing it, they would hire me to play on jingles, on commercials, and they say, "I want that
Oh.
sound. I want that sound." So, that became like my sound. And then
Yeah.
when Simmons drums came out, I got Simmons drums. I was one of the first ones to have Simmons, and that was it. That was like a drum machine sound, but playing drums.
Mm.
And that led to the Debbie Gibson record, and with sounds that no one heard before, playing on top of the drum machine, making the drum machine sound real. Sometimes I would go in the
Yeah.
studio, I'd get hired just to play a hi-hat and cymbals. Sometimes it would be hi-hat and cymbals, and I always had my octopad, my Roland octopad,
Yep.
and I would have a snare drum on there sampled to the same sound that was on the drum machine, or triggering the drum machine and hitting the extra hits so that you're making it feel like it's
Oh,
it's
yeah.
real. And I
Okay.
learned that, believe it or not, from listening to Prince, because Prince, when Prince first came out, he was a
Hmm.
phenomenon, but
Yeah.
nobody realized what a great drummer he was. And fortunately, when I got to spend some time with him and talk about all that, I was so honored that he actually knew Mantis, because that's
Mm.
around the time that he came out with "I Want
Yeah.
to Be Your Lover." So we
Right.
were playing in the clubs at the same time. And basically, he was doing what I was doing, but nobody knew it,
Uh,
because until later on, he was making the drum machine sound real.
yeah.
So I
Live.
always, so drum machines, there were other people who took it even further than I did, like Jimmy Braylauer, as I said, and there was a
Hmm.
few other people, and then that became, the sound. Um, Naked Eyes, always something there to remind me. Everybody thought
Yeah.
that it was me on the drums. I thought it was Frank Velarde because he had, but I'm not sure who actually played the drums on that. But everybody thought it was me because of that sound.
Yeah.
That became my sound.
Yeah. It was like your signature sound.
Yeah, and then tons of records. My engineer Butch Jones, who's my engineer to today. I mean, that
Yeah.
bass drum on the Mantis record was one of the most powerful sounding bass drums, and the tone and everything that he got with on that. He did those Mantis records, and that's been sampled thousands and thousands of times.
Wow. Now, Billy, you've worked with artists as different as Debbie Gibson, Branford Marsalis, to Ringo Starr.
Well, now let me
How?
say something, just to correct a little bit. Uh,
Yeah.
Branford Marsalis, we just did a jingle together,
Oh, okay.
A McDonald's commercial. So that's the only interaction I had with him.
Oh,
And
okay.
then he went on, of course, as we know, to play with Sting when Sting put together with Omar Hakeem.
Yes.
And
Yep.
Dolette McDonald, who was in that band, was in Mantis at one time.
Oh, okay.
Actually, she sang on all our records.
So let me ask you, how does your mindset change when you go from supporting a pop teen idol uh, to these other artists, even up to a Beatle?
I just, like I said, it's all about the music. Growing up, I was into all kinds of music. I
Hmm.
wasn't a big jazz guy, and all my jazz player friends, they still goof on me to this day. Um, and my good friend Denny Sywell, who
Yep.
um, his book is out. Um,
Yep.
he's my next rock seller because I've been doing some stuff for rock seller. He's my next rock seller feature
Oh, good.
next month. So it jazz. He tries to teach me some jazz because I see Denny a lot and I stay with him and Monique when I'm out in California for years. I know
Yeah.
Denny a really long time, and I don't even like to fake playing jazz because there's so many great jazz players, and it's just something that I appreciate it. I
Hmm.
appreciate all the forerunners, Miles Davis and John Coltrane, of course. I mean, I listened to all those records and
Oh, yeah.
studied some of those drummers when I was growing up. But that wasn't my thing. My thing was really rock and funk. People say, well, what
Yeah.
kind of drummer are you? And you know, play that funky music, white boy. That's me.
Well, Mantus earned its way into the legends of the Vinyl Hall of Fame. Now, but you've also built a legacy beyond the charts and accolades. So, if tomorrow every record that you played on disappeared, what part of your impact would you still want to be remembered for?
I want to be remembered as a good person, a kind person, a passionate person, and somebody who helped people through music. Because
Mm,
that's my main thing. Whether I write music, I read about music, I play music. My life 24/7 since I was probably 10 years old and got that inspiration, got my first drum set. There was
mhm.
nothing else that I wanted to do. I wanted to be a different Beatle every day. I didn't know that Hal Blaine was playing on like 50 of the songs that I was playing along to until later on. I wanted to be in a car, turn on the radio and be on
Mhm.
like every channel on it didn't matter what genre of music it was.
Yeah,
That's and I always wanted to have a band and then also do studio work, which worked out for a while. And Jeff Porcaro, next to Ringo, he's probably my biggest influence, and he's the
ah,
perfect example of having been a great, amazing studio musician playing on, oh my God, it's countless, to having his
yeah,
own band, Toto. So that was always my goal. So at least I touched a little bit of that. So it makes me happy in my life that, if everything disappeared, um, which slowly, unfortunately, music, if we don't start getting our shit together,
right.
um, music will disappear or it'll just become background noise, which would be a real big mistake in the world
Oh,
because we
yeah,
already feel it now. People don't have empathy like they did. They don't listen to the music the same way that they did. They don't
right.
create music the same way. So we have to keep that in our lives. It's humanity,
Oh, yeah.
and finding out I work with Rick Allen from Def Leppard and Lauren
Mhm.
Monroe, his wife, on the Raven Drum Foundation, and we're finding out Lauren, she studies heavily about how important music is
Yeah.
to our mind, our body, our souls, in how important music is in life. And
Mhm.
because music is getting to be like where it's free now and it's almost like a paper towel, you
Yeah.
know, it's not a good thing,
Mm-mm.
and I'll keep preaching that forever along with my associates and other people who fight for that. But
Mhm.
it's very hard because the younger generation, I like that they're still into the music that I was listening to and grew up playing
Right.
and listening to, but they don't care about who played on a record. They don't,
No.
they don't even care who the artist is. They
Right.
don't buy it, so it doesn't really mean anything to them. Like I said, music is
Yeah.
becoming like a paper towel.
It's like disposable.
Yeah, and
Mm.
that's not a good thing.
No. Well, I'll tell you this, Billy. When you said music, I mean, when I was growing up, people would buy the vinyl records, and it was actually an event to listen to the record. You know, it had meaning. You knew the history or you learned the history, which made it more valuable and added more backstory to the music you were enjoying, whether it was Beatles or 70s funk or disco or whatever have you. Every
Right.
record was a moment in time.
Yeah.
So,
And it got everybody together.
yeah, you shared,
You
it was
know,
a
you
shared
could,
experience.
yeah, you couldn't wait to get a new album or have your friend come over and say,
Yeah,
check this out. And then
yeah.
everybody sat around, listened to it like over and over and listened to it, and then
Mhm.
read all the credits, looked at the album cover,
Yeah.
roll a joint, because it was great for rolling joints back in the day. Not that, but these days marijuana is legal and it has a lot
Yeah,
of health benefits, so I don't feel
yeah,
bad. I used to try not to promote that, but it's a
right.
way of life.
Yeah,
But nowadays, thank God vinyl is actually every year gets stronger and stronger.
yeah.
So turntables are coming back, and people are getting into vinyl again. So hopefully, there'll be some kind of turn. You know what it's like as we get older.
Oh,
Everything that
yeah.
goes away comes back into fashion,
Yep.
music, art. It all comes back.
What's old is new again. Yeah, no. I'm a
Exactly.
big vinyl guy from way back when, and I've never stopped. I mean, yeah, I've done CDs, I've done the files and this and that and FLAC and all that. But when it comes right down to it, give me a good vinyl record any day of the week.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at. Now, earlier, Billy, you were talking about your father, and your father pushed for formal drum lessons, and your grandparents rewarded you with your first kit. Now, looking back, what role did discipline versus freedom play in shaping you as both as a musician and as a mentor?
It was, at the time, when you're young, of course, I was already starting to play along to records. And before I even
Mhm.
have drums, you make up like everybody does. You
Yep.
make up, certain pillows and everything. And, you beat on anything. And then when I finally got my drums, being that my dad was into music and he saw, I guess, how passionate I was, and that,
Yeah.
I obviously was not going to be good in school. Um, because all I thought and breathed was music 24/7. So
Right.
he said, if you're going to do this, he always used to say, you got to have something to fall back on. And he was a photographer and he was a camera technician for Pentax when Pentax was at its peak
Oh,
back then.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
one thing related to the Beatles is like when I used to go to his office, the Beatles had Pentax. They all had Pentax cameras. So he had a picture of the Beatles with all their Pentax cameras in his office. And I used to think, that was the coolest thing because, I felt like my dad knew the Beatles. But he was so into music and he played trombone in the big band in the Navy and everything.
Oh, okay.
So he was very, very into music. And he wanted me to take lessons, and he used to let me stay up, Johnny Carson. My mom used to yell at him because I had to go to school the next day. But he would tell me, you know, I'll let you stay up tonight, watch Buddy Rich on Johnny
Ooh,
Carson, because he was a huge Buddy Rich fan. So he
yeah.
wanted me to see, obviously, the best.
Yeah.
And so he instilled in me about taking lessons, and then I took lessons, and I went right up the block from me. There was a music teacher. He wasn't a drum teacher, he was a music teacher. And in those
Mhm.
days, all you did was play on a little pad. I'm showing my age now, but it was just a little piece of wood with a rubber
Yep.
pad. And I remember he had a sitar on his wall. He had a baby grand piano,
Ooh,
but he was a music teacher. He wasn't, which was good in a way because he was
mhm.
teaching me notes and he was talking about music. But I wanted to, play along
Oh,
to a record. I didn't, after a while on the pad and reading the notes, I knew that, yes, I was learning it, but I knew that I wasn't going to be that kind of drummer. And so I took lessons for a while. And then my dad saw that, I was interested. And then when I got my drums, as I got a little older, I went to Al Humphrey in my neighborhood, not too far from where Carmine and Vinny Appice lived.
yeah.
And, and I used to walk in there and I was, now at this point, I'm like 14, 15. That's about the age I am. And I used to be able to walk to lessons every Sunday. And there used to be a big poster of Carmine when you walked in. And all I
Yeah.
used to hear was, and at that point, Carmine was already, he's been on Ed Sullivan. He was like, he
Right.
was on his way. Carmine, everybody knew who he was. So I used to hear, if you want to be as good as Carmine, you better practice, but he had drums,
Yeah.
2 sets of drums. And I must have played Mustang Sally, 1,000 times, but we played drums. And then, of course, he taught me how to read. But again, I did it, but I was never one for practicing, even to this day.
Mm.
I hate to say that, but there's a difference. It's according to what kind of drummer you want to be, being that we're talking about drums.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you want to be, at the time, to be a studio musician, you did have to know how to read. Thankfully, by the time I got to do studio work, it was because of my merits of what I did on the records. So they just wanted me to copy what I did on the dance
Yeah.
records. I was playing on all these dance records. There was no reading for that. And the jingles at that point were also like the one I did with Branford. There was no more reading involved,
Mhm.
so I didn't have to worry about that. And I knew I wasn't going to be like a Broadway drummer, because that you have to know how to read charts. And I give it to
Right.
all these guys that can read charts. But the thing with playing note for note is you don't get your own creativity. And I'm not taking
Yeah.
away. Everybody
No.
should learn the basics of music and reading music and getting that under
Mhm.
your belt. But if that's all you rely on, I saw as I was growing up, all my friends that were virtuoso at reading, when you
Mhm.
took that music away, or we just got into a room and I'd start a beat and I'd say, "Come on,
Oh.
just let's jam."
Yeah.
Nobody could play unless they had the music in front. So that made me really not want to read. So
Yeah.
and I had a good ear. So my, Al, my drum teacher, God rest his soul, he even wrote a drum book. I forget what it was called back in the day, but
Mhm.
he would put the chart in front of me, and I didn't practice it. I would just, and then he would show me, so he would play it, and then I would just look at the paper and just copy what he did until he got
Yeah.
hip to that because he was on the wrong page one time. He caught on to that. So now I do that for the few times that I give lessons.
Uh.
You can't pull that trick on me.
Well,
But
I know
I
like
was glad to
sometimes.
learn.
Go on. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I was glad that I did learn and then put that under my belt because it did help later on.
Yeah. Well, and what I was going to say was sometimes when you're, just my opinion, when you're playing drums note for note, it can be almost cold and clinical. Where if
Exactly.
you're playing with the rhythm that's inside you, there's freedom.
Yes,
And it gives
absolutely.
you more freedom to play.
Absolutely. And that's but even with drums, it's really basically any instrument
Mhm.
because I mean, if there's a chart and somebody's a great composer and they want it done the way they want it done, they're going to hire the people that they know can do that.
Right.
You're not going to get into a studio and say you can read. Although Tommy Tedesco from the Wrecking Crew, he used to do it all the time. Sometimes the music, somebody, if you saw that film, it's one of the greatest films.
Yes, I saw
He
it.
had the music upside down, and somebody saw it upside down. They realized he's not reading that chart.
That's too funny. Now, changing gears a little bit, Anya, being around modern drummer for decades, you have seen drumming from every angle. Uh, Player, producer, journalist, editor, advocate. What's one of the main things you've learned about drummers as people that are most non-musicians would never have guessed?
Drummers are the nicest out of anyone, and you can ask anyone that question, any musician, and they'll tell you that drummers have a certain brotherhood and a certain bond and sisterhood now
Mhm.
because there's so many great female drummers
Right.
that
Yeah.
we'll share. We don't have secrets. There's only so many
Yeah.
beats that you can play. There's only so many licks. You just change one note, two notes, and
Yeah.
it's a different thing. So we have this brotherhood and sisterhood. And when we did the Modern Drummer Festival, Ron Spignati, of course, God bless his soul,
Hmm.
he took me under his wing. And before I worked there, I was the artist liaison for the festival. And we had the festival for over 20 years every year. And we broke a lot of drummers. We made a lot of drummers famous. There's no doubt about that. And at one time, if everybody wanted to be on the cover of Modern Drummer because it was on the newsstands, it was like
Right.
the leading drum publication in the world. It was the Bible. That's those days are over. Now, it was what I got from that and learning about drummers' personalities, because
Hmm.
I knew a lot of drummers from being in the industry before I even worked at Modern Drummer, and
Hmm.
a lot of drummers over the years I'm really good friends with. Some
Ah.
people used to say, these guys are just your friend. They're calling here all the time because they want to be in the magazine. They want to be in the magazine.
Right.
And most of my friends, they I was fortunate enough because I had records out. I wasn't a journalist really. I didn't go to journalism school. I wasn't a
Hmm.
journalist. I just knew how to speak to these guys and interview them because I did what they did, and I had
Yeah.
known them, so it was comfortable. But I learned about their personality, and to this day, so many of them, they're not. Some are acquaintances,
Hmm.
and the few that used to call me only when they needed something, I made that clear to
Right.
them. So they either apologize or just, I don't,
Yeah.
they don't need me. I don't need them. But getting to know their personality and still being friends with these people to this day,
Hmm.
as friends, sometimes we'll talk on the phone, no matter who it is. And we don't even talk about music sometimes. We talk about we talk about family,
Yeah.
we talk about life, we talk about,
Yeah.
so these, I was fortunate enough. That's what I got out of it. Friendship.
Mm.
Of course, I learned from all these people because as I'm interviewing them, I'm learning just as much as everybody else. Now, a lot, of course, I knew, and then of course, if you interview somebody a couple of times, the story don't change. They're still playing in the same band. But a lot
Right.
of my friends at the time, they were in superstar bands and they
Hmm.
didn't need to be in Modern Drummer. I wanted them in Modern Drummer because I wanted to just talk about drums on the record and
Yeah.
and recording drums and stuff like that. But they really didn't need Modern Drummer. And of course the drummers that I did get to know, if they were cool enough and they kept in touch without hounding,
Yeah.
because drummers don't have publicists. They never
Right.
did. It's the band that has the publicists, and
Yep.
drummers always, they were always in the background. That's why Jules Follett from the Sessions did that beautiful hardcover drum book, Sticks and Skins,
Hmm.
because she was a photographer and she could never get a shot at a drummer, and so drummers were always stayed in the background. That could be why they're so sincere and a little bit more mellow, but
Hmm.
um, they wanted recognition, and that's how and why Ron Spignati started Modern Drummer, to give the drummer,
Ah.
and then to get
Yeah.
Buddy Rich as the first cover. Everybody knows that story. Modern Drummer. I was part of writing that book with Adam Budowski and
Hmm.
Bill Miller and Rick Van Horn, and I mean everybody that was there even before me. So that's all been said, but I think I take away the friendships, the real friendships that I
Yeah.
have with these people. I mean, they like Keith Carlock. When he played the festival, and that was filmed, Hudson Music,
Hmm.
who puts out Denny's book. Um, we knew he was going to be a superstar after that because that's all everyone spoke about. And
Ah.
there's multiple guys like that.
Right.
That was on. So it was a good time to be there and do what I do. But I never really thought of what I was doing. I just did it.
Just did it. I love it. And that's really sometimes the best advice. Just do it.
Yeah, yeah. You
Yeah. I
got it.
like that.
You can't overanalyze things. Same thing when you're in the
Mm-mm.
studio recording. You kill a song if you have to do more than 5 takes.
Yeah.
Move on to a different song and go back to the other one, because even if you do 5 takes, you always go back to either the first or second take.
Right.
And
Trying to
that's
figure
because,
out.
yeah, you're analyzing it too much. You're
Yeah.
thinking about it too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. That's a good way of looking at it. I never thought of it like that, but you're right. Now, switching up again, Billy, as someone who's bridged old school grit with modern platforms like podcasts and rock and roll fantasy camp, what do you think the next generation of musicians most urgently needs to understand? Not about just music, but about survival.
Well, number one, they have to get they have to learn about the business of music if you're going to be in music. Actually, it's no matter what it is. These days, you could be working for a big corporation. You
Mhm.
have to learn the ins and outs of how society and life. Now, I don't believe in a lot of things that so-called society, and that has, of course, changes over time. But we're at a point now, and I don't want to point fingers, because
Mm,
we do it to ourselves, really.
right.
Life is going to go on, within you or without you. Life
Yeah.
goes on. So you just have to try. The younger generation, I try my best to just mentor them or give them advice if they ask for it, because
Mhm.
as soon as you give them advice without being asked, then it's like you're preaching to them, and
You're
then it
preaching.
turns them off. Even as
Yep.
you're older, if somebody comes to me and they start like saying, you should be doing this, you should be doing that, I'm not going to listen to that. Now, if they say, "Hey, did you ever think about this?" and then have a logical explanation and
Yeah.
a nice conversation, even if we don't agree, because
Mhm.
you're not going to agree with everything that everybody says. Everybody has opinions. But if you're going to ask advice, my advice is to just pay attention and be in the now. You know,
Mm.
don't do like what I did. Like, it is a good thing to say next, because it does keep your ego in check. It
Yeah.
does. And talking about ego, as an artist, no matter, actor, musician, in the arts, sports players, you have to have a little bit of an ego,
Yeah.
only because, number one, you have to keep reminding yourself of your accomplishments, but you can't rest on your laurels, and you always have to try to be better. So the thing is not to get to the point of where you get so big headed that you think you know it all. No one wants to be around you, because
Right.
that's a huge thing. And we have to get back. I love social media. I was a big
Mhm.
pusher of social media since way back when. That's why blogs, I was doing blogs for Modern Drummer before anybody knew what a blog was. I turned my emails
Ah.
from my drummer friends into blogs.
Ah,
They,
okay.
they would say, "Hey, Billy, I just played on this new record," not asking to be in Modern Drummer, and just letting me know like who they were going on
Yeah.
tour with. And I was like, you know what? I could put this on the web and turn it into a blog. And then that's how that
Yeah.
came. And then, of course, after that, podcast became a big thing. Now
Oh, yeah.
everybody has a podcast show. Everybody's a podcaster. It's like everything else on the web. Everything gets too much oversaturated,
Yeah.
overexposed, and it's hard. So my advice to the younger generation is just, if you have a passion, no matter what it is, learn everything you can. You may have to take a job as an intern. You may have to,
Mhm.
do what you need to do to learn, listen to different opinions, and then make your own decision, so that no one gets blamed. No one, there's no one that can tell you exactly what you need to do. They could advise you, but no
Right.
one's going to tell you. You have to decide that yourself. And you
Mhm.
talk to a couple of people who you admire, who you
Mhm.
respect. It took me a long time for that, but not as much as it's taken this younger generation, because when you're young, as I
Yeah.
say, you think you know everything. Even now, as you get older, you think, "Oh, well, I've learned enough." No, I want to keep learning. I'm going to
Yeah.
keep learning. I want to live to 100. And, that
Mhm.
gives me another 25, 30 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
God, who knows? Nobody knows. But I
Right.
want to, I want to learn, you
Mhm.
know, I want to fly a car, a car, not yet,
Well,
because I've been in California with the cars that, drive themselves and everything. And I'm still a little leery about that. But the younger generation, if you have a passion, just do it. Have fun,
mhm.
just do it, and learn as much as you can. And social media, it's a tool. You're not going to be, all these kids, they want to be, I say to them, what do you want to do? I want to be an influencer. I want to be an influencer. Now, back in the day, it was reality TV. Oh, I'm going to be a reality TV star,
Right.
and now we saw what happened to a lot of those reality TV star people.
Yeah.
Now, influencer, what's an influencer? Because I'm wearing I'm pushing this shirt today. I mean,
Right.
big deal, or I'm playing a drum video because I'm filming now, because everybody films every single thing. I'm
Right.
filming a drum video of me playing. Now, what's the purpose of that? Okay, I got millions of views. Okay, now what?
Now what? Yeah. What are you doing with that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
now what?
Yeah, no.
So
That's some good
you have
advice.
to, yeah, you do it because you're going to do it anyway. As we were growing up, and even to this day, there's not a lot
Mhm.
of money anymore in the music business. Not the way it was. Unless you're
Mhm.
in a big band and you're on tour and you're doing your thing and you're
Right.
selling merchandise. Why do you think they put 3, 4 bands together? Popular bands, because one
Mhm.
band can't sell out. There are a few that can. Def Leppard can. They play
Oh,
stadiums.
yeah.
The last 3, 4 years, they've been on stadium tours selling out, 80,000, 100,000 seats a night.
Oh, yeah.
But they still go back to their roots and play a smaller place every once in a while, just not to forget
Right.
what it's
Where they
like.
came from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the younger generation, there's a couple of good bands. The band called Feel, I like them. The
Mhm.
Struts is probably my favorite band.
Oh.
Bruno Mars,
Yeah.
him and his band, his brother Eric is the drummer in that band. A lot of people don't know that.
Oh.
Um, these are the people to me that are doing it the right way. I remember when I met Bruno for the first time and saw him live.
Mhm.
We were backstage, and I said to him, and Prince was still alive, and I said to him,
Oh.
"Oh, I see you're going after Prince's crown." And
Ah.
he looked at me and he goes, "You bet I am." He winked,
Nice.
and but that was his determination.
Yeah. His
He doesn't want
drive.
to be Prince, but he wants that recognition, and he is. He's a great
Yeah.
drummer. He's a great keyboard player. He's a great singer, songwriter,
Yeah.
dancer. I mean, he's got the
He's got it
whole.
all.
He's got it all, and it shows, because those are the people that rise to the top. And
They
he's
sure do.
young, and still,
Mhm.
I remember he was on the cover of Rolling Stone, and I know his
Mhm.
dad, and of course I know his brother.
Right.
I know his family, and he was on the cover of Rolling Stone. He had a cigarette, and I was like, this is not a
Oh.
good message. And of course, my son was like, leave, because my son always had a cigarette, and it
Right.
was like, it was cool. I was like, it's not cool. And then
Yeah.
I don't know if his dad even said something to him or whatever, but it was like, you know you're still going to do what you want to do. And
Mhm.
some people think that's cool. In the video
Right.
with him, Lady Gaga, that song is one of the greatest love songs ever written. Andrew Watt produced that.
Yeah.
Die with a Smile.
Yep.
She's smoking in the video, but they wanted it to look like that old, Tammy
Yeah.
Wine, that kind of, that
Mhm.
kind of vibe. So I get it, but we don't want the artists of today have to realize that they're shaping the next generation, like Madonna. I mean,
Right.
Madonna was, you know, she may
Yeah.
not have been the greatest singer in the world, but she was one of the greatest entertainers, and she
Yeah.
could sing. She could sing, but she wasn't Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston. But
No.
that wasn't her thing. But people wanted to dress like her. People wanted, you're seeing little kids dancing, like
Mhm.
Madonna. You know, we don't have that anymore. We don't have those like kind
Yeah.
of and especially bands. We need bands. And the last thing I'll say, in Nashville, this is why I love Nashville. They
Yeah.
still make records where everybody plays together, or at least the rhythm section.
Right.
You have to have that interaction. If you're going to be in a band or
Yeah.
you're be an artist, singers is a little bit different because the producers will get the track and then the singer will come in and they want to concentrate on the singing because that's what that
Yeah.
person does. But when you're a band, you have to get in, you have to learn, and the younger generation can't do that. They're used to sending tracks back and forth, which is great
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
now you get to play with anybody. And I could send a track to somebody in New Zealand. Great. You
Right.
know, I could get a guitar track from somebody who's in California if I need a guitar track today from a buddy. Okay,
Mhm.
that's all great. But when you're in a band, you have to learn to play with other people because we call them happy mistakes. And I say this all the time. I
Right.
can't stress it enough. You could talk to anybody from my generation. Um, and unfortunately, the younger generation is not prepared to do that. So they don't make records that way. And that's why, like you said
Mm.
before, certain things feel sterile. You don't get
Yeah.
that warmth. You don't get that feeling.
Yeah.
If you,
Clinical.
yeah. And the records, yeah, if they're manufactured, because you
Mhm.
manufacture records, that's always going to be. But if you want something really authentic and you want somebody to feel something, you have to have the human element involved in
Yeah.
that because that comes out. So
Yeah.
that's my advice, and I think that will start to save the music industry because studios will start to get back because
Mhm.
a home studio, unless you have a really good home studio, you're not going to be able to record like that.
No.
So studios maybe will come back a little bit. They won't be able to charge $300 an hour like when I was growing up. When I think about
Right?
that now, you can't even get $20 an hour for somebody for a studio.
No.
Um, and you can make a record in your closet, you know, or sitting
Right?
on your couch. But um, there's something about the type of music you're going to play. And if you're going to be in a band, there's nothing like being in a band. That bond between band members,
Yep.
brothers, sisters, you know, that's the key. And that's
Yeah.
what we lack in this world, empathy. And people, you know, you pass by homeless people and you just get so used to it that
Yeah.
it
You're
still
numb.
bothers me, but it doesn't
Yeah.
bother a lot of people. People just they don't even see them there. They just walk right by.
They don't
And
even
this
see
has
him as
been going
people.
on, and I've been saying this for the last 20 years, but
Mhm.
who's gonna fix these problems? I always say, well, when I run for mayor, you know, of New York, I'll try to straighten it out, but I wouldn't want to be mayor. I wouldn't want to be a politician.
No.
I wouldn't.
Mm-mm.
I mean,
Yeah. Well, now with music, for many of us, I imagine probably even with you, Billy, music is like it's both a refuge and a profession, especially for you, especially during difficult times in your family, right?
mhm.
But has there ever been a moment where you question whether the music was a gift or perhaps a burden?
The music is a gift. The
Yeah.
music is, was, and always will be a gift. This is what God gave me. You know, I believe that I've been here before. Uh,
Hmm.
Eddie Brigatti of the Rascals. I hate to drop names, but these are friends. Eddie Brigatti of the Rascals. He turned me on to this book called The Seat of the Soul.
Hmm.
Uh, Gary something, I forget anyway, it came out over 25 years ago. He was on Oprah. She did the forward to the book, and now so he read it recently, and it's like the 25th or 20th anniversary of the book, and he told me about this book.
Hmm.
He knew that I was going through some things. He went through some things, and I read this book, and you know, it's an amazing book if anybody's into that kind of thought process. And
Right.
it's like we all we all kind of circle and circle, and when we leave this world, we might come back where we left off because maybe we want to go further, or we didn't get a
Hmm.
chance to go further, and you wind up. It's a deja vu. Everybody has deja vu.
Right.
You wind up with the same type of people and the same circle of people, because everybody's on this journey together. Now, you're not going to, in the book, it says you're not going to remember. You're going to, no, this life is going to be forgotten about. And they
Hmm.
say soul lives, right? So your soul now goes on. But when you have those feelings, and that's why I say it's about being blessed, when you have those feelings that something's going to happen, and it does,
Yeah.
good things are going to happen, bad things are going to happen. That's life.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
how you deal with what happens. To me, that's the biggest thing I've learned. It's the key, The Secret, which is another great book, and
Hmm.
Netflix, if people should check that out. If they, The Secret is how you handle things that happen. Bad things are going to happen. Good
Right.
things are going to happen. It's how you handle it. That's what it all comes down to. And you have to, again, be confident in yourself. You have to have what you believe in and say, okay, it's going to work out. This is going to work out. It might be bad now. I
Hmm.
never looked ahead. I always was like freaking out because something's happening now. I don't like what's going on. Tomorrow it's a different story.
Yeah. Clean slate. Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, Billy, if you had one chance to sit down with your younger self at the CBGBs back in like 1977, what warning or encouragement would you have given to yourself?
Uh, don't be so like worried about everything. Don't let stress and anxiety take over your life.
Mm, that's
That,
good
and
advice.
that's hard. That's hard to do, but that's why meditation, I used to try to
Hmm.
meditate, when the Beatles, they taught everybody about meditation, which
Right.
they all did and do to this day. And I
Right.
know a lot of people that have been doing it since then, and you can see what that does to you. And only up until recently, in the last 5 years, did I actually start to like really meditate and be able to not constantly. I mean, I
Oh,
have so much noise in my head at times, especially growing up. A lot
yeah.
of people do. You have, voices telling you, when I say voices, I mean people, not voices.
Right. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
you have people telling you this, telling you that, telling you that. You're reading stuff, you're trying to comprehend. It's just, and then if you overanalyze, again, if you
Hmm.
overthink things, it turns into a vicious cycle. So
Mm.
I would say, believe, as I do now, that things are going to work out and things are going to go the way you pretty much manifest them and make them.
Ah,
Things are going to go that way. Just give it time. Take a breath. Be in the now. George used to
yeah.
say, that was a big thing with George Harrison. Be in the now. He even had a song.
Yeah.
I was always never in the now. It's like I always was next, next, next. Even the middle, I was in the middle
Ah,
of doing it, and I'm already thinking about, well, what's the next thing? Oh my God,
right.
is this going to go good? Oh, am I going to play good tonight? You can't think that way, and it
Yeah.
took a long time. So that's what I would tell Billy at, in 1977. you know um that's
Enjoy
the
the
advice.
moment.
Yeah,
Be here
enjoy
now.
the moment, enjoy what life is given to you, and it is
Hmm.
a gift, being able
Yeah.
to play music and heal the world and help the world. you know I'm on the good side, so
Right.
no
Count your
regrets.
blessings.
Exactly, no regrets.
All right. Well, Billy, we're going to wrap it up, and you're going to hate this next segment. I'm just going to, because it's going to be pressure, but just the top of your mind. Okay. Give me your favorite five top drummers.
Yeah, that is a little tough because I'm going to piss off some of my friends.
I know. I know.
But you know what?
But this is how
Um,
you feel today. It could be
yeah.
different
Well,
tomorrow.
It's more, yeah. Well, that's the thing that I loved about John Lennon. He used to say something, and then he used to say, he used to get criticism for what he said, and they used to say,
Right.
everybody interviews me every day, 2, 3 times a day. It's like tomorrow, next week, I may feel different. This is how I feel
Right.
now. So
Yeah.
right now, off the top of my head, of course, Buddy Rich,
Right.
Ringo,
Yes.
Jeff Porcaro.
Right.
Those are my main guys that will stay every day.
Right.
Those are the three that will never change. And then it fluctuates from, you know, Jim Keltner,
Jim
Steve
Keltner.
Gadd, uh, Ginger Baker, Ian
Yes.
Pace, uh, i- i- any studio musician, Hal
Hmm.
Blaine, he taught me so much. And
Right.
fortunately, I got to be very close to Hal. I miss him to this day.
Right.
So those would be the ones that, I would say now. Denny Sywell
Of course.
was a biggie. I tease Liberty because I say Liberty didn't influence me to play, but I listened to Billy Joel and Liberty,
Yeah.
uh, you know.
Yeah.
So there's so many. I always like the band and then the
Hmm.
drummer in the band, But those
Right.
first Buddy Ringo and Jeff Porcaro, those will never change, never. And
Now,
I'm sure I'm going to be getting a phone call after this people see this interview and say, "Oh, that's
well, this is
real
just
nice."
the top of your
Thanks.
head. You can blame me.
That's right.
So
It's your fault.
that's right. Now, when I think of drummers that stand out, and this is just off the top of my head right here, right now, in the moment, we're being here and being now. You remember Tony Thompson, right?
Tony was a very good friend of mine, and Tony, I learned a lot from Tony.
Yeah. What a great drummer. I
No,
mean,
he was the sound of the '80s.
yeah. Well, even his work with Power Station.
Yeah,
Wow, that drumming, it
yeah.
really stood out.
Well, the
So,
Power Station, the studio in New York, that became the Tony Thompson room. And when
mhm,
I used to talk to Tony all the time, and of course I've interviewed him. I'm very
yeah,
close to this day. His widow and their children that
right.
he adopted. I'm still close to them. And
Mhm,
Jensen just had a baby himself, and
right.
Tony would have been ecstatic about that.
Wow.
But when I spoke to Tony, and that room became, everybody wanted to go to the Power Station, and Jason
Right.
Caruso, I think, who's the one who engineered that stuff. And Tony used to say, "It's just a Yamaha kit," because that's who he played,
Yeah.
and I just hit the drums really hard.
Yeah.
He's like, "There's no tricks, there's no magic," but in that room, that sound was created in
Yeah.
that room. So that always became. That's why they named the band the Power Station. At
Yeah.
that. And then Chic, of course, me and
Right.
him, we were playing on a lot of disco stuff. So we used to, we were both not really.
Yeah.
He was into Mahavishnu and everything. And a little tidbit: when he went for his audition, Niall, he had his big set up.
Yeah.
Niall and Bernard, two of the greats, they made him take everything. Take that away. Take that away. Take that away. Take that away. Get rid of that. Get rid of that.
Oh,
And
man.
Tony was like, "What?"
Yeah. Well, now, another drummer that stands out in my mind is Stuart Copeland of the Police. His
Another
percussion,
influence.
his drumming, amazing.
Yeah. Now, speaking of Stewart, see, this is the thing that I always say about drummers, and I've said it, lots of
Mhm.
times.
Yeah.
There's great drummers,
Right.
unbelievable drummers, but then you have the drummers who influence thousands of drummers.
Yes.
Those are the drummers that are always going to stand out. Stewart's one of those guys. Peter
Yeah.
Criss is one of those guys.
Yeah.
Tommy Lee was one of
Yep.
those guys. He don't get the credit that
No, I agree
he
on you
deserves.
with that.
And that's because he got into the whole movie star thing, and
Right.
TMZ following him around, and
Yeah.
enough is enough. Um,
Mhm.
those are the people, you know, Dino Danelli, who I mentioned, one of
Yeah.
my favorites. It's the people that influence thousands of drummers.
Yeah.
So Stewart made me, think of that because he invented a new way of playing and a new
Yeah.
style. And,
Yeah.
sometimes Sting didn't appreciate that. And that's why they butted heads to this
Yeah.
day.
Well, and another couple drummers that stand out for me, just the top of my head right here, right now. I think of Keith Moon, obviously of the Who,
Hmm.
and also when you talk about hitting drums hard, I always think of when I think of like caveman drumming, I think of Jason Bonham or John Bonham. I'm sorry, from Led Zeppelin,
Yeah.
and
Now,
he hit those drums so hard, man.
believe it or not, he didn't.
Really,
Yeah.
it sounded like he was.
That was John's sound. John was everybody thought he was a basher, and for years he
Yeah,
everybody was like, he's a hard hitting. I mean, of course, when you're playing drums, you're gonna hit the drums hard because you
yeah.
have to. Because once Marshall amps came out and the drummers were like couldn't hear anything because the guitar players were blasting, you had to hit the drums hard, and that's when drummers started turning the stick over. You know, um, but John was a very finesse player and he was very into R&B. So
Oh,
if you listen to a lot of that stuff, now Eddie Kramer, who I had the fortune to hang out with and work with and actually interview, um,
yeah.
you know, and Glenn Johns, there were really sometimes only three
Oh,
mics. And
yeah.
everybody used to say, they used to come into the studio and they used to say, I want to sound like John Bonham. And then Eddie would
Huh.
say, I'll call him. And I could set your drums up, same drums, same mics. You're not
Hmm.
going to sound like John Bonham because another one, an influencer. And
Right.
if you listen to "Fool in the Rain," that's Bernard Purdy, another one of my favorite
Hmm.
drummers.
Right.
Um, you listen to that shuffle, that Jeff Porcaro took Bernard
Right.
and "Fool in the Rain" and combined it for Rosanna. Those shuffle beats, you can't play those shuffle beats and get a feel by bashing. It's
No.
impossible. Rock and
No.
roll is a Texas shuffle if you want to play it the right way. Nobody plays
Right.
it the right way. Nobody knew what he was doing, couldn't get that feel until they saw that How the West Was Won or that
Ah.
DVD that came out, and you actually see John Bonham. You can see he's playing that Texas shovel, which I just
Ah.
spoke to Denny Sywell about. Is one of the hardest things to play, and
Yeah.
Denny's great at playing, shuffles.
Oh
But
yeah. Denny's fantastic.
John was not a basher at all.
Oh, I thought he was. It's just the way the sound came across.
Of course, it
Now,
was huge.
oh yeah, right. Now, to wrap it up, this will be an easy one for you. What is one of your favorite memories of being in Ringo Starr and the All Stars? Do you have a favorite memory from that time?
I do. Well, I wasn't in Ringo Starr and also, so let's make that clear because
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to mislead people. I just got to sit in. I played percussion twice for
Right.
the encore, which happened to be a little help from my friends and give peace a chance. So
Right.
that was an honor in itself. But I think, I mean, of course, the first time I did it, it was me and Casem Sultan from Todd Rundgren. It was just. I try not to think about it, so that kind of just happened. And
Mm.
then Ringo came to me later on, at another time, and he said, "So, pretty cool playing with me, right?" And I said, "Yeah," but I looked around and it was like Todd Rundgren, at that time it was Todd Rundgren, and
Yeah.
Steve Lukather, who's my favorite
Yep.
guitar player. So I was excited about that too. And of course, it's Ringo. What gets me
Right.
excited about Ringo and the All Stars, I've seen every single show except one,
Hmm.
um, is watching him play songs that I love.
Ah, yeah.
That to me
Yeah.
is the greatest. So the second time that I got to play a couple of years after the first time,
Hmm.
at the Pier 17 in New York City, beautiful, the Brooklyn Bridge is behind you, and Hamish Stewart. I had
Yeah.
met Average White Band. I met Steve Ferroni when I was like 14, 15 years old, and I met Hamish at
Right.
the tour. I used to play hooky, and I used to go to the studios and befriend people like through
Yeah.
different channels, and they used to let me sit in on sessions. So I got to watch Average White Band record.
Oh wow.
So of course, I stayed in touch with Steve Ferroni, another great influence on me through all the years till to this day. Hamish,
Mhm.
I kind of after Average White Band split up, and then he
Yeah.
was in Paul McCartney's band. I was so happy
Right.
about that because I
Yeah.
love him. He's a great bass player, great guitar player, amazing singer.
Right.
So quickly, I'm on the stage, and beforehand, that was the first time that I saw Hamish because he wasn't in the All Stars the first time I played. It
Right.
was the first time I saw Hamish, and I of course, he wasn't going to remember. But then when I started telling him the story, he kind of like, I guess, got a flashback of some little kid in the studio, like probably saying, why is this kid here? Because they used to tell me, you don't say a word. You sit in the corner, and if something looks like you're not supposed to be in the room, you go outside. So and Arif Mardin was producing them. To me, it
Yeah.
was like some old guy. Look at this. Who's this old guy
Yeah.
producing that? I was right. So anyway, we're on stage and I'm playing, and now this is after we had the conversation,
Yeah.
and I'm playing, and I turn around, and Hamish looks right at me and winks his eye, and to me, that's a moment that I felt that, I didn't get as excited because I already was on stage with Ringo and
Yeah.
Mark Rivera. He took me up that night, and he's the music
Yeah.
director, of course. Um, and of course, Steve Lukather was there again, uh,
Mhm.
and Colin from Men at Work. But when Hamish turned around and looked at me and winked, it took me right back to me being that little kid and meeting somebody famous and being in the studio. And
Yeah.
that's basically, that was my school. I used to go to the
Yeah.
music stores and hang out. I used to go to record shops. I used to go to the studios, the record plant. Shelley
Yeah.
Yakis used to let me hang out. Frank Tabino at Atlantic, he was the manager. So that was my schooling, and I didn't. To me, I was just there, so I was meeting people.
Yeah.
I guess I've always been a people person, and networking is very important. But you can't be a
There you
pain in the
go.
ass.
Right.
Can't be.
But you know what's cool is that little wink from Hamish. Once again, like we said before, full circle.
Yeah,
Good stuff.
yeah.
Billy, I want to thank you for all your time and patience in answering these questions. Uh, happy with the questions?
Very happy. A couple of them in there that I had to think about, and as we spoke earlier, I've been doing lately. I don't know why. I'm on the other side. I'm used to giving
Mhm.
interviews, and doing interviews all the time. But on the
Right.
other side, lately, everybody's coming out and they want to interview me, and I go, why? For what? So I appreciate you having me, and I like some of the questions that you ask that some people don't ask. So
Right. Well,
thank you.
that's what we do here at Beatles-A-Rama Radio and TV. And speaking of that, folks, you have been listening to Billy Amendola and his amazing story, his career, his advice, his insight for the Magical Mystery Tour, Beatle Years and Beyond. I'm James D. Jones for Beatles-A-Rama Radio and TV. And Billy, have yourself a wonderful day. And once again, man, thanks so much for your time and your patience. It was great.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. And we'll see you next time.